Are you crazy?
But 40s really hit differently. I'm not doing it the way millennials say, like, it just hits different. No, I'm going to do it grammatically correct by saying it hits differently. That irks me so much. But it's true what they say, especially as a woman, because our hormones, they change, like they respond to stress and environment, nutrition, and age as well. So I can't deny that. Money and plastic surgery can only buy other women so much, but when it comes to feeling your optimal, performing at your optimal, your body still knows where you're at.
I mean, you mentioned like the cosmetic surgery. I don't even recognize that as a valid or, this isn't for looking good. This is for fixing issues like resulting injuries from accidents and, maybe some birth defects, right? I always see the whole topic of plastic surgery or cosmetic surgery, as they call it now, right? I just think it's just so overprescribed, like most other things in life that come to deal with superficial challenges that we have. In reality, it's a mental, emotional challenge that we're just not accepting of ourselves. And so we're going to go or we're not disciplined enough to put in the work to actually naturally improve the way we look and feel. Yeah. And we could go so far down that rabbit hole to the point where we arrive at the gender dysphoria and the the transgender movement that's picking up. It goes really deep. This whole idea that we can change the way we look so that we can feel more accepting of ourselves and feel better and more accepted in society as well, which I think is a lot of the reason why people do change their gender. Which is fucking crazy when you think about it. I mean, you're talking about something that you cannot reverse.
I honestly never thought we would get to this point in our lifetime where saying that a man is always a man and can never be a woman type of thing would get you canceled or vilified or even to be turned into the pariah. And people will tout, follow the science, when they deny the very basics of science. And I love how you pointed out that, it's overprescribed, cosmetic surgery, anything aesthetic, because when you think about it, I mean, for example, America, we're probably the most overprescribed nation in the world, where you have a headache, here, pop 5 Tylenols or whatever. And it's so hard they have ads on TV for all these medicines, for these prescription drugs, and they say, well, side effects include suicidal thoughts and, I don't know, homicide. I don't know. It's like, is it worse? Should I just suffer my eczema and psoriasis than try and kill myself? So it's so extreme. But to your point about wanting to improve or change how we look outside, because it's really, we're trying to prescribe or compensate or heal something inside, there's so much truth to that. And I wonder if all this narcissism going on with the trans issues, the gender dysphoria, just the even BBL, that Brazilian butt lift, that whole trend,
I didn't even
right?
know about that.
I mean, we talk about narcissism.
You mean the when women inject their butts?
Yeah, well, they put implants in there to make it look really big and juicy.
Oh, that is a big thing here in Colombia.
Yeah,
it's huge. It literally is huge.
It's out there. I mean, I like big butts, and I cannot lie, but you got to work for it.
Well, there's something about a fake big butt that just doesn't do it for me, And it's scientifically explained that when your eyes see a form that doesn't make sense, like you've got really thin, stick legs, and you've got this really big butt, it doesn't attract you anymore because there's something missing there. It's not natural. And so that whole attraction that it was designed to generate doesn't actually happen. So I think, again, like, this is just crazy. People injecting their butts. Cosmetic surgery is nothing new, right? I mean, it's been around for, I don't know how long now, but it's been around for probably longer than I think. And the bottom line is, it's a lazy approach to looking good if that's your objective. If you want to have a big butt, if you want to have a nice body, if you want to have a healthy looking face, youthful face, which is really, I think, the majority of operations that are done,
Mhm.
is to make you look more youthful and vibrant and sexy, right? So appealing to
Mhm.
the other sex. I think going to the gym, changing your diet, and just taking better care of yourself could probably alleviate like 90% of all of those situations. Not like 90% or more, I would say today, which really puts into perspective like the kind of mental health
Mhm.
problem we have right now.
It's also more economically sound to just do that, to just go to the gym and eat well. People think, because I've been in the fitness industry for, gosh, what, 7, 8 years now, maybe more.
Yeah, it's a long
Competitively, I
time.
started in 2015, and people would say, "Oh gosh, the workouts are hard." And it's not until you start competing that you realize, "No, I'll do the workouts all day. It's the nutrition part that's hard. It's disciplining yourself to track your macros, to track your calories, to track your sleep even, because it's a sport. There's a discipline involved, but it doesn't have to be that extreme. People who just want to look good and feel good about themselves can do it at such a basic level. Like what I'm doing now, I'm turning 42 exactly
You do
tomorrow.
not look it. Let's just say that. We'll get that out the way. You do not look it.
I'm just, time goes by, and I was 27 one day. I closed my eyes and I made a wish and I woke up and I'm 42. It's like, what?
Yeah, it feels like that sometimes. I'm 39. I'm going on 40 in April this year. So not
Mm.
long, couple of months or a month
Yeah, oh, we're
rather.
just a month away from each other's birthday. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Uh, and I kind of, I think you just have to accept it, right? If you're otherwise you're
Mhm.
going to be in constant battle with your physiology. And I don't want to
Mhm.
be, the saying, young in the mind, young in appearance, or something like that, right? I
Yeah.
I want to be that person, and I think it's
Mhm.
possible. I don't want to be obsessing about my age, which is really really easy to do. I would argue more for women because
Mhm.
just the way it is for women and the difference between women and men. So I get it. I totally understand. But it's good to speak to people who are already way older than us, and you can
Mhm.
ask them, how do you feel right now? And a lot of them will say, I feel great, better than ever. And it's like a surprise, almost as if you
Yeah.
weren't expecting them to say something like that,
Right.
which really like it. And I don't know if that's a mental training that they have, like they've trained themselves to accept and appreciate the process of life, which is essentially, I think that's a healthy thing, is to you know death, okay, which is ultimately the thing here, right? We're on our way out, and
Yeah.
we've become so detached from death. I was watching an Instagram video yesterday. It was a deer who was swimming in a lake, and there was a boat. They were
Mhm.
filming this deer swimming in the lake, and they were,
I think I've
they
seen
were
that.
kind of crying out, "Oh no, here it comes!" And there was an
Mhm.
alligator behind it, and the conversation went something like, "Okay, let's get in the way, let's distract the crocodile, let's get the alligator to." And eventually what happened was it bit the deer, but the deer was able to get out of the river eventually, and then make it to safety. And although that is a really nice thing to see, because obviously the deer survives and lives to fight another day, I think what we've done is we're so scared of death. We've become so scared and detached from the cycle of life that when we see something like that in the wilderness, our first instinct is to save the prey.
Mhm.
But then if you look at it from the perspective of the alligator is just another animal. It's
Mhm.
just trying to survive. It's just trying to eat. That's its food. If we're not there all the time, it's going to be eating animals all the time, every day. And
Yeah.
so you just it's we're so scared of aging, so scared of death. And I think if we're able to open our minds to the fact that it's not so bad, right?
Mhm.
That's just the way it's always been and the way it's always going to be. And so
Yeah.
let's just enjoy every moment we have here. Jesus, that was more deep than I thought it was going
There
to
was this line that I heard. This was a quote from Gosh, I must have heard this when I was a young child, which is the day we're born, every single day from the day we're born, we're one step closer to death, which
Yeah.
is like, gosh, that's grim, but it's true, right? You just live another day, and that's another day closer to the end of your life. And when you're young, you're in such a rush to grow up. You know, when you're 12, you're like, I can't wait to be officially 13, and
Oh
then
Jesus, yeah.
16, 18,
Yeah.
and then 21, and then the first time you get your driver's license, I think I was 15. I would drive to just the store around the corner. I'd be like,
Yeah.
Mom, do you need anything? I will get you eggs. And she's like, no, we're good. And then you reach an age where you are just, I'm so sick of driving. I've been driving all day. And it's just this circle of life. It's this cycle of life, right? And I think about what you said, and I want to build on that. When you talk about people who are more advanced in age but do act young, I look at my parents, and I'm not like biased or anything, but I look at them and I'm just so amazed because my mom is turning 71 this summer, but she does not look it. She still fits in the same clothes that she used to wear in college. She's
Hmm.
a petite woman. She's 4'11", and she wears a smaller size. She's like a double size zero or a zero or something. We used to borrow each other's clothes. I will honestly say I'm a size 4 now, and I'm comfortable with that. I'm okay with that. And I look at my dad and I ask them both, I said, I will never reach a point in my life where I'm ready for you both to move on to, the next life, to the eternal life. I
Yeah.
will never be ready for my parents to be gone. And they laugh about it because they're like, you're so independent. Like, how are you not ready? I said, in my head, you'll always be 37 years old. And she's like,
Hmm.
but that's even younger than you are now. I'm like, gee, thanks. But I watch them and I see how they've kept themselves youthful. For
Yeah.
one, it's what they eat, right? And they always ask me for tips, like, what's a good substitute for this? What should I got them on the carnivore based diet too. So I
Oh
got them
yeah,
into that. Yeah.
that's
And
interesting.
my mom and my dad, they love to walk around. They love to get out in the sunshine. I explained to them, like, you don't have to be afraid of the sun. Just do it right. And then actually sunbathing can be good for you if you do it the right way. And see, my dad, he's a brainiac. And this is where my son, his grandson, right? My son takes after my side of the family. He loves to use his brain. And the more you use your brain and engage it with work that is not familiar to you, you're still sort of creating neural pathways. And so that keeps him from succumbing to age and decay, whereas other
Hmm.
people their age would have gotten what?
Yes,
Forgetful. And yeah, so
one
that's how
hundred
I see
percent.
him cope. Hmm.
Got to keep that brain working. I think it's a constant balancing act of just repeating things that are, habitually repeating activities that are going to benefit you, whether it's physical or mental or emotional, the
Yeah.
meditation side of things, and then there's the whole kind of like puzzle solving side of things. Building neuroplasticity
Hmm.
is something that really hit home for me when I went back to learn the guitar, for example, or when
Yeah.
I learned how to speak Spanish. It's funny, you can almost feel your brain kind of take a step up and start to operate better.
Yeah.
um, it's just like any other muscle. So that's really interesting. This whole episode is gonna, maybe help a lot of people, because what we can do is we can go through what we feel constitutes a healthy life for the average individual today. I know a lot of people struggle with this. I've spent a lot of time myself in the health and wellness industry. When I was younger, I went to university and I studied naturopathic nutrition. And I think you know a lot about this because I think we've talked about it before. So we've
Mhm.
kind of like got very similar, um, parallel
Values. Yeah.
knowledge and, experience in the same area of health. My
Mhm.
father and my brother were pharmacists. That's what they were trained to do, and that was what their initial career was pharmacy. And now my brother, arguably, is still a pharmacist. He works with the government in the UK for medicine,
Mhm.
but more in a consultory role. Is that how you say it? Consultative role?
Consultancy.
Consultancy role. And then my
Mhm.
father went into real estate when he sold his pharmacies. He actually kind of did a really good job, and we're all grateful to him for all the hard work he put into his career, because he made a bunch of money, sold the pharmacies, and then went into real estate. And
Smart man.
yeah, well, I mean, he was just really, he's Chinese, right? And he came from a poor family, and he kind of had that fire inside of him to never experience that, and never allow his family to experience the poverty that he did. And there's all the kind of like forms of abuse that comes with it, with a drunken father and all that kind of thing. So I think he's done a great job. But growing up, I was observing, and I'm the most observant child. Apparently, that's all I did was just observe. When I popped out the womb, I kept my mouth shut and I just watched everything.
That's why you're so clever.
No, but I observed the kinds of people that would come into the pharmacies every week. And I would see the same people, and look, honestly, they didn't look healthy. And I thought, okay, well, maybe it's because they're sick. But then I would see them come in like a month later. It was the same person. And they would say, hey, how you doing? Because I was just a little boy. And it really stuck with me. There was that observation that even though pharmacy is supposed to be health and helping people to become healthier, live healthier lives, in reality, I didn't see that in the flesh. I saw a sick person who was probably just getting more sick. And I just couldn't justify that connection. That was just a very strange thing. It was like, it was just the opposite of what you would expect. And I think further down the line, it helped me get into naturopathic nutrition, which is how to use food to heal the human body, basically, in a nutshell.
I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That just made me think
in.
about truly the power of food to heal us and our body when you feed it right. And I've always told this to my former clients before, is if you feed your body the right things, your body will know how to heal itself. And I used to have thyroid issues, and I had it for, a decade. Like, I was struggling with it. I had Graves' disease. It got
What's
so
Graves'
bad.
disease?
Like, Graves' disease is when your thyroid issues have gotten to a much higher degree. And my goiter, I had goiter, like my throat was already swollen. My eyes were starting to protrude.
You were like
And
a
I thought,
reptilian.
I really did. I mean, it looked scary. I still have pictures. Well, this was well before the advent of iPhones and social media. So thankfully, there are no pictures out there floating. But I remember my sister and my dad, they took some photos of that period. And I saw a couple of me in it while I was going through that and struggling with that. And I thought to myself, I just started my career in TV, and now I have this condition where I'm absolutely horrified to look at myself because I looked nothing like myself. And that made me very depressed. So I was on medication. I went through radioactive treatment for it. And
Really? Jeez.
yeah, it was bad. They come into my hospital room dressed like an astronaut with these tongs that are holding a metal canister, and they hand it to me. No one else is allowed in the room, by the way. And they tell me, take this, and then just leave it outside your door after. And I'm like, you want me to swallow that? And like, you're dressed in a hazmat suit. I'm like, is this safe for me? But that was part of the radioactive treatment. That was a capsule. So I struggled with that for over a decade. And then years later, the effects of my medication, because I was on maintenance medication, because of my thyroid issues, I acquired a heart condition. I had mitral valve prolapse, which is pretty common among women from what I've researched, from what I've read.
What does that mean, mitral valve prolapse?
So my heart was pumping so fast that it wasn't pumping blood efficiently, and it would cause me to black out. And I've passed out. I was in university talking to a friend. I passed out cold. I like collapsed. I crashed on the ground. Wow. She didn't know what to do. So she ran to get help, and I woke up in the clinic, or no, I woke up in the hospital. My then boyfriend was there, and his dad was there. They rushed me to the hospital. And the first diagnosis that I got was, low blood sugar. I said, okay, so my then boyfriend's dad was like, let's get her chocolates, and he bought me like these pound bags of like Three Musketeers. I'm like, I'm sure that's not the solution to this. It happened again, and then finally I got some lab work done. My parents wanted my blood work done, and they found out I had hyperthyroidism,
Mm.
which means my thyroid was working too fast, so I lost so much weight in such a short time. And the symptoms are strange because it's like shiny skin, shiny hair, weight loss. I'm like, wait a minute. So it's a disease where you
This ain't
look
so
great.
bad. Yeah.
You look great, but you're sick, you know? And the opposite of that is hypothyroidism. It's when your thyroid is lazy and you gain weight no matter what you do. I kept
Mm.
losing weight no matter how much I ate.
Mm.
But my medication's side effects was that I would go from hyper to hypo. So then
Oh, really?
yeah, so then I finally was in the hypo area stage of my recovery, I guess. And then I had Graves' disease and I was just so depressed. Then years later, I got into bodybuilding. So I want to say, so that was 2005. And then 2015 was when I started lifting. And you know what? 2 years in of heavy lifting and training and eating clean and eating better, I went back for a checkup, not a single trace of any of the issues I've had before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Incredible. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been on zero medication since then.
You know what is probably not going to sit well with a lot of people when they hear this. Some of the solutions to their health problems are so simple,
Mhm.
but no one in the medical establishment will ever tell them that. At least the tradition, the not the traditional, the allopathic modern
Yeah.
Western system will ever tell them that.
Yeah.
And it hurts when someone says, I cured X disease by just simply changing my diet or
Mhm.
going to the gym or, reducing my levels of stress.
Yeah.
Because to them, they've been told the whole time they've had this, and maybe their whole lives, really, because we got programmed with this kind of way of thinking, that there's nothing we can do about certain illnesses and that we must take medicine. We must
Sure.
take pills, have surgeries, or treatments like the radioactive treatment that you have, which
Mhm.
is known to be so invasive and damaging,
Oh
right?
yeah. Mhm.
And I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor in the Western medical system. I've not done any of that training, but the doctors that have come forward to say that they've lost all belief in the system and now they are adopting natural approaches that seem to work so much better. And these are holistic approaches, which what it means is, you know, you're not dealing with the problem from one single aspect. So, for example, cancer, maybe you might want to cut that cancer out and then it will hopefully not come back. But that's not a holistic approach because a holistic approach would look at the cause of the cancer. What's the likely
Mhm.
cause of this cancer? Is it stress? Is it some kind of toxicity in the environment around you?
Yeah.
Um, and then address those things through diet, through lifestyle, through stress management protocols, and some treatments as well. And that's a more holistic approach because you're dealing with the problem from a number of different aspects. So for me, doctors who come forward and say I've lost all, just like the Paul Saladino, the
Mhm.
carnivore
Yeah.
diet guy,
Carnivore MD.
carnivore MD.
Yeah.
Now, I don't agree with everything he says, and I don't agree with it not because I'm cleverer than he is or I've got more knowledge than he is. I'm sure he's, with all of his training and his history in the field, he knows what he's talking about. But he's an extreme guy, and he goes for really just the bare minimum foods, and just completely cuts out all vegetables
Yeah.
entirely. And he's got a really interesting reason for that. But for him to have been trained, I think it was one of the top medical schools. I forget the name, so I'm not going to say it, but it was one of the top medical schools. And he's done a lot of different types of medical training, and he's a real doctor. So for him to come and say, look, I got rid of all of that. I just gave it up because I just lost faith in it. And now I do this and I'm healthier than ever. And I've seen this help other people. That gives me hope. And it also reinforces the way that I feel about medicine, which is that if you're able to come at it from a more holistic more natural, avenue, I think you're going to probably do a lot better in the long run. And again, I'm not there are certain things that I feel are the treatments and the approaches from the allopathic system are justified.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say pharmacy isn't, effective in certain cases, but I think it's more of a kind of like treating the symptoms rather than
Right.
actually addressing the root cause, which is
Yeah.
what what I wanted to say was, if you think about the history of humanity, we've gotten pharmacy and the Western medical system really, really recently, and we've been around for a long time. So
Mm-hmm.
how did we survive and thrive to the point where, so many years later, so many centuries later, and it's only now that we're doing these very invasive treatments, and they're supposed to be apparently the most cutting edge, most advanced treatments available, and they cost so much money, right? I mean, you start
Mm-hmm.
to think, well, how does that even make any sense? I mean, there must be something to this. Oh yeah, okay, right, it's a business. Yeah, it's a business.
Of course, yeah, it's profiteering, really. And when you think
Mm-hmm.
about the basics of it all, we used to rely on plants for medicine.
Yeah.
Back in those days, they knew which plants to grind up, to turn into paste, and to put on what kind of wound, which ones to boil and to drink, and which ones would alleviate, I guess, an upset stomach or quell a fever. And I feel like that is the kind of grassroots knowledge we should at least be bringing back today. And I know you, Brandon, and I talked about this before. Um, how when I was a kid, I stumbled upon a book that my dad had bought, and it was about all the kinds of plants there are, what poisonous plants, which ones are poisonous, which ones are edible, medicinal, and so on. And like something like that is so handy to have anyway,
Mm-hmm.
because if in the event of a catastrophe like we talked
Right.
about before, and you're thrust back into the wilderness or the
I
jungle or the
wouldn't know what to
matrix,
do personally.
wouldn't know what to do. And what will outlive us all is probably vegetation. So to just at least have that knowledge of
Mm-hmm.
what is harmful, what can help heal, if you have a wound, what would prevent an infection. One of my closest friends, she's a microbiologist. I love her. She's so clever, she's so intelligent. And she told me before how, because those dandelion, not dandelions, yeah, dandelions, they're really pretty. They look pretty, but my husband's like, they're weeds, kill them all. And then, then I said, but the bees need them for food, which they do. And in the other house we used to own, our yard, we had a massive front yard and backyard. And if you left it untended, just all these pretty yellow dandelions would grow out of it. And all these bees would like, come and feed. And I loved seeing that. And then my friend Joyce says, you can boil that for tea. And I'm like, really? She was like, yeah. And like some parts of it, apparently you can eat as a salad. I would be afraid to try it, but apparently you can. And that's true. And she would give me these cutouts from like a 1930s newspaper where they have like these crazy recipes out of like dandelions. And I'm just like interested. It's so interesting how people back then lived, how so simply they lived in
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
harmony with nature, with vegetation, you know?
Yeah, it's sad because although I see the benefits that have been brought from technology, specifically the internet. I mean, we spend most of our time online, right? I do, at least, and I know most
Yeah, me too.
people in the Western world and more developed nations do as well. So we've lost that connection and that practice of just being present with nature, tending to farms, tending to animals,
Mm,
and understanding how the world works, on a very fundamental level.
mhm.
And it's something like, it's so weird to be a human being and not understand how to survive if all of this technological infrastructure we have just stopped working one day. That's a very worrying kind of
Yeah.
anxiety fueling feeling to have. So again, I mean, coming back to the point you made about the book that you stumbled across and the Bear Grylls stuff we discussed on one of the previous episodes, that survivalist guy who has a show on National
I
Geographic,
love
I think
Bear
it is.
Grylls. He was RAF.
Yeah, he was a special forces, British special
Mhm.
forces, soldier, and he learned a lot, and he wanted to share it with the world, and so he did that show. And I remember him. I guess that just to cover this small little bit here, he had an interview with one really popular podcast by a British guy. Um, my brain doesn't seem to work today, so I can't remember the name for that. But I'll
I think
try
I
and put it in the
saw that.
description.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great podcast, and he was on one of the episodes, and he said that when he first started out, he actually said no. Like, he got the offer to do this show because they knew he was very skilled and he could talk about it, and he
Mhm.
said no. And then eventually he decided to do it just for his kids, I think. And yeah, before he knew it, it was like the number one show in its niche,
I
which
loved
is
it.
really
Mhm.
cool. It's just cool how things work out in the end. But we've learned a lot from people like him. Um, going into some of the, I guess, you know, diets, right? We're talking about food, and I'm trying to give people on this episode some actionable advice so that they can go
Mhm.
away and maybe experiment with some things. But when you talked about the carnivore diet before, is that something that you currently practice? And have you ever tried the opposite, which is veganism? I would imagine, right? That's the opposite,
Mhm.
okay, of the carnivore diet. What I know that there's a bunch of vegans that basically say it's the best, the best thing under the sun. More people should do it. What are the arguments that you understand against veganism and just having a
Mhm.
diet that's consolidated to one type of or two types of food groups in general are? Like, maybe you
Yeah.
can shed some light on that.
Well, I want to clarify that I'm not strictly on a carnivore diet because, like you
Mm.
said, Paul Saladino can be a little extreme where I simply love eating some vegetables. There are some that I stay away from, though, because of the points that he mentions, which is they're very high in toxins that are anti nutrients, which means it prevents your body from absorbing actual nutrients that you are taking from animal sources. And because and Bear Grylls mentions this in an interview. He used to be vegan.
Right.
Bear Grylls used to be vegan. And finally he understood, like, if you're a plant and you can't defend yourself because obviously you're an inanimate object, right? What is your
Mm-hmm.
number one defense? It would be poison. You would have chemicals that would prevent you from being tasty or from being eaten or consumed. And that makes a lot of sense. So the more research they put into studying which plants, like for example, cruciferous vegetables, sure, they contain certain amounts of iron and potassium and this, but how much of it do you need to eat in order to
Mm-hmm.
get the RDA or recommended daily allowance equivalent to animal sources? And
Mm-hmm.
so I would stick with some stuff that I enjoy. Like I love sugar snap peas or snow peas. I try to stay away from edamame, even though that's my favorite
Oh,
snack.
really?
But
Okay.
it's soy,
Mm-hmm.
and
I
just
love that.
too much soy in the body is like it's got its own naturally occurring estrogen. Um,
Yes.
but even that is a whole nother can of worms. But I
I mean,
do.
I also just on that riff on that, I stay away from mint because
Ooh,
mint also
yeah.
stimulates estrogen, as far as I understand.
Mhm.
Um, I learned that when I worked with a client that I used to have. The client was, I'm not allowed to say their name, but they were a leading product in the bodybuilding niche,
Mm-hmm.
and they had this product that all the biggest, the bigger bodybuilders, the better known bodybuilders would endorse and promote. And they were launching a new line of shampoos, and they told me that the worst shampoo you can use for men can use for their hair, for their receding hair loss. So this
Mm-hmm.
was a hair loss shampoo that they were launching, was anything that had like tea tree or mint or
Tree oil. Okay.
menthol in it, because what it does is it kind of like affects the testosterone. And I
Mm.
thought, oh my god, that kind of makes sense. It's so smooth, soothing, and so fresh, and so there's
Calming.
something
Yeah.
about it that you kind of like, you feel, yeah, okay. So I try not to even eat things like this, which my girlfriend has bought. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love mint. I love mint leaves. I'll put them in my salads. I'll put them in a lot of things. But I mean, I tend to grow my own produce.
Mm,
Well, I haven't yet since we bought this house, but in our previous places where we lived, I've always grown my herbs and my vegetables. So the stuff that I would eat would be cucumbers and tomatoes. I know they say, oh, it's nightshade and that's not supposed to be good for you. But I like the
right.
way it tastes and I like how refreshing it is. Like heirloom tomatoes are so good. And
Hmm.
I know they talk about how, oh, it has lycopene, which is, anti-cancer. But the lycopene is actually only released if the tomato is eaten with a fat.
And
And I
this is the case with a lot of foods, right? You get
Mhm.
the and again, this is a holistic kind of way of looking at
Yeah.
things because we are so good at kind of isolating what
Mhm.
would be kind of um, catalysts for health. So
Right.
we can take a supplement all day long, but it won't have the same effect on our body because
Mhm.
in reality, when that vitamin or that compound is taken in the presence of another vitamin or another mineral or another compound, that's when it really actually reacts and is able to be
Mhm.
absorbed by the body.
Yes.
And this whole idea of breaking everything down to individual pieces,
Mhm.
I do not subscribe to that approach. So I love the way that you
Mhm.
just said that because that's so important. And I didn't remember that. But
Yeah.
people need to pay more attention to whole
Mhm.
foods and rounder meals, let's say.
Yeah.
I don't want to, I don't want to say that I support eating a lot of simple carbohydrates, for example, right?
Mm.
But by
Yeah.
rounder meals, I just mean eating things together that are healthy for you and
Mhm.
not worrying about breaking them down into their constituents too much.
Mhm. And again, we are not making any recommendations or prescriptions on this show. We're talking about what we have learned, what we have tried that has worked for us. So, obviously, like Dr. Huberman, one of my favorites in the medical field, would always say, do your own research and do what's good for you, what's best for you. So, find out what is best for you. But
Yeah.
what I do with these, like nightshades and other vegetables and fruit, like cucumbers, is I take the seeds out because the seeds also contain certain toxins and anti-nutrients that won't be good for you. So
Hmm.
whenever I eat tomatoes, I make sure there's extra virgin
Really?
olive oil, good quality. But also when you're purchasing olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, don't buy the ones in plastic bottles,
Yes.
especially in clear bottles. They need to be in dark bottles because it oxidizes once it's exposed under sunlight and too much heat. So you want to keep it in a cool,
Mm.
dry place in your kitchen, in your cupboard, in a dark bottle. So you want to drizzle that on your tomatoes, take the seeds out, a little salt, a little pepper. It's refreshing and it's delicious. So I like to mix some things. There are some stuff that I don't really, I mean, I used to love mushrooms. My husband loves mushrooms, but it is just so hard to get them to a stage where I'm confident they're clean enough from when they were
Um,
harvested because of the way they look. And even
mhm.
though I know that there are advocates for it, they like reishi mushrooms have
Mhm.
supposedly beneficial health effects. I drink reishi mushroom based coffees like
Four Sigmatic?
adaptogen. Four Sigma, yes, I've been drinking Four Sigma for years, and I love
Mm.
that stuff. But in terms of preparing mushrooms, like I'm very wary about it. It's like few and
Mhm.
far between that I would serve it at home. But I do try to eat nose to tail. We buy half a cow every year, and we have it butchered and we store it. That way, we never have to buy bits and pieces from the store. And I remember the butcher saying, do you want the liver and the heart and the tongue? My husband was like, no. I said, yes. He looked at me so confused, like, are you the woman I married? What are you going to do with those? Are you going to feed us that? I said, it's so good. Just give it a try. So I cooked some liver. He and my son were not fans of it. I made liver pate from scratch. Hey, I was very proud of myself for making that from scratch, but
What I've noticed is when in the developed nations, we're so far more detached from food
Mhm.
than we are in less developed nations. So I lived in the Philippines, and that's where we met.
Yeah.
Um, I live now in Latin America, in Colombia, and people eat things that you wouldn't consider eating, but there's nothing wrong with what they eat. In actual fact, in a lot of cases, there's a more mineral and vitamin content in that
That's true.
food. For example, liver doesn't really have the brand that it has in the US and the UK that it does here or in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
Heart is another one.
Mm-hmm.
Right, those organs, brain in certain
Yeah.
places is a delicacy, and there are nutrients in these organs. And you know what they say, you are what you eat. So
Mm-hmm.
there is certain things in these organs that will help the same organs in your body, right? And that
Yeah,
just makes a
that's
lot of
true.
sense, because why wouldn't it? That's what your liver essentially is made of. So if you eat that, then your liver's going to benefit, because that's what you're
Mm-hmm.
putting into your body. um
It's also
yeah.
more bioavailable. You know, people would think, "Oh, I supplement with this," which I do. I supplement with the Heart and Soil I'm not recommending this at all. I don't make any money off of this, but I gave it a try and it seems to work for me. So, Carnivore MD, Paul Saladino's supplements, I have been using those for about a year
Oh,
now,
okay.
which is the
Right.
beef organs and the fire starter. And what I do is I break down the capsules and I sprinkle it on my son and my husband's food, so they at least get that extra,
Hmm.
because they don't eat as conscientiously as I do. Like I'm the cook in the family, so I will prepare everything. But my husband's not quite as adventurous as I am. I think it's the Asian in me that's like, I'll try anything, as
Yeah.
long as it's not moving.
Right.
So I would supplement it with that, but it
Mhm.
is more bioavailable to get it from a whole food source than from anything that's processed. Because again, we're trying to stay away from overly processed things. That's why stuff like meal replacement smoothies and shakes, they're good when it comes to you're in a rush, you got to fill your tummy, or you want something low calorie. But that is not sustainable in the long run. And it's not good for you either, because the binding agents are probably what? Xanthan gum,
Yeah.
some form of seed oil, sunflower, soybean oil, palm oil. Stay away
Mhm.
from seed oils. And that's why I quit a certain brand that I used to drink all the time. When I looked at their ingredients, and the first thing on there was soybean oil, sunflower oil.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm killing myself, you know?
Yeah, with regards to the kinds of foods that are commonly consumed as I would say replacements for sugar,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
replacements for flour, or any kind of like natural gum, those are clearly going to have an impact on your body, because they're manufactured in ways that are so unnatural, and you
Yeah.
need kind
Artificial.
of cutting agents to,
Mhm.
for example, with soy, the cutting agents is hexane, which is a in rocket fuel.
Yeah.
And
That's crazy.
hexane, yeah, they bathe the soy in the fuel to separate the edible part from the inedible part, and that's probably what they found to be the most effective way to do it. And to me, it's like, why would you eat something that requires that process? And it's really quite an effective money making product. You know,
Hmm.
you've got the whole the whole of the food industry using soy to replace flour, for example, in bread or pasta, or
Hmm.
well, maybe not pasta, but in bread or anything that would usually just be um,
Made of wheat.
made of wheat. It's got a
Yeah.
lot of soy wheat in there now, or soy flour. So I agree with you, and just being more conscious about, does my drink have aspartame in it, or stevia? I mean, stevia, I only
Hmm.
recently found out, isn't actually all it's touted to be. I used to be a
Hmm.
big fan of stevia because it's a natural sweetener. It's derived from the stevia plant, but it has an impact on your health. I think natural sweeteners, you shouldn't be eating too much sweet food.
Anyway,
That's
yeah.
one of the issues, right?
Hmm.
Exactly. So if you need sweetener in everything you're eating, then maybe there's an issue with the way you're eating, right?
Hmm.
So if you put sugar in your food, it should be okay, as long as you're not eating too much sugar. You see what I'm trying to get at here? So
Yeah.
I think a lot of the issue really is just the habits we've come to um,
Develop.
develop, just because of the way that culture chooses to be. We choose to eat more than we should. We choose to eat sweeter foods than we should. and we've forgotten what a natural. If you go to Japan and you eat it like a normal Japanese local person, you initially will wonder how they can do it, because it's so void of the kinds of sweeteners and salts and things that we're so
Mhm.
used to over here. But over time, because I used to live in Japan, what I found was my palate changed, and I could then taste the sweetness in the natural food, and it was enough
Mhm.
for me. I got used to it, and it helped my body detoxify. I actually
Yeah.
had psoriasis on a lot of parts of my body,
Mm.
and I went to Japan, and I think one of the things that changed my body and got rid of that psoriasis was the diet. The
Mhm.
diet basically cleaned me out. And I wouldn't say, it's the cleanest diet on the planet, but there
But
is a reason why Japanese people live so long.
and they have great skin too. And when
Yeah.
you think about it, they think, oh well, they eat so much rice, then why do they have such a low obesity rate compared to America? Well, you also have to think about resistant insulin or resistant starches, right? That you have to look at what spikes your insulin level. So if you want to eat potatoes and you want to eat rice, that's great. I'm not saying you should never actually cut out a certain food group. That's not healthy. So what I've found is that when you cook potatoes and rice, once you've cooked them and then you cool them, that turns it into a resistant starch. That means that it's not going to have the same effect on your body as rice that's like freshly cooked. It's like steamy hot cup of rice because you've given it that time to cool, and now the starch that's found in it is resistant, so your body's not being able to like absorb all of it, and therefore not accumulating as much excess fat in your system. And so if you look at sushi and all the rolls they have, that rice has been cooked but then it's been cooled. So
Hmm.
that was so interesting to me. When
That
I
is
came across
interesting.
that article, I was like, this is amazing. This makes so much sense.
Hmm.
And so ever since I learned that, I started practicing it in my home where I would, because I cook a lot of basmati rice, I would cook the rice, cool it, and then serve it for lunch later. But what I would have is the other hot dishes and just pour it over the rice, and then that heats up the whole dish. But that makes
Hmm.
so much sense. And you can taste the freshness of their fish too. You can taste that it's
Oh,
sweet
yeah. If it's a
because
good
it's fresh
place, yeah.
fish. Yes. And they have
Oh, God.
vegetables too. Like, for example, the Koreans, they eat a lot of kimchi, a lot of fermented kimchi, which I am a huge fan of kimchi. I love it so much. I will have it with anything. I'll have it in fried rice. I'll have it with eggs. I'll have it on its own with some furikake. I'll sprinkle some furikake on it and have it at night. And simple things like that you can even make yourself. That gives you a healthier gut.
Uh-huh.
And like what you said, how food is healing, our gut is our second brain. That's our parasympathetic nervous
Yes.
system. So when we're feeling anxiety, when we're feeling nervous and stressed out, it's felt there. So when your gut is imbalanced and it's not healthy, then you're not able to really understand why you're feeling the way you do. Change the way you eat. So try having more, not just probiotic, but get some prebiotics in you as well. Because I know that there's this huge thing about probiotics, this and that, but you want to stay away from like commercial yogurts that are sweetened with flavors. I always go for the Greek yogurt because it's
Hmm.
basic, it's simple, and it's my body will know what to do with it. And as far as sweeteners, you were talking about sweeteners, I use natural raw honey,
Right.
unfiltered raw honey as a sweetener for desserts or drinks or teas, because then my body knows what to do with honey because it's natural.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's really smart that you pointed that out about sugar substitutes.
Gut health is a great topic of discussion. I lived in Korea for a while, so I know what you're talking about when it comes to kimchi. Kimchi, basically, if
Mm,
anyone doesn't understand what kimchi is and never tried it before, you will probably recoil a little
not
bit with the
like it.
smell of it. It's very powerful
My
smell.
husband
It's
hates it.
basically fermented cabbage, right? And the way that they make it is traditionally they'll put it under the soil. So they'll
Yep.
wrap up all of this cabbage and they'll kind of marinate it, and then
Hmm.
they'll wrap it up in a leaves or plastic, and they'll put it underneath the soil, and they'll leave it for
Hmm.
months, and then they'll pull it
Yeah.
out, and it will be right,
It'll be
it's kind of like
ripe.
broken down. It's ripe,
It's
but it
ripe.
tastes interesting. It tastes interesting, and it definitely helps your body and your gut health specifically. And
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why you know Koreans seem to be so slim is that they have a really good gut health, and they've carried that luckily from generation to generation. Not like our
Mhm.
generations, we seem to have forgotten a little bit about what constitutes a good diet. But
Mhm.
um, uh, yogurt. I eat a lot of Greek yogurt too, and I choose the one without the flavorings. Um, maybe based on what we were saying before, I put not raw honey necessarily. I put kind of any honey I can get my hands on, because I don't live in the same place all the time. I'm moving around a lot. Sometimes I can find raw honey. Sometimes it's just,
A
whatever
little
old
harder
honey in
to
a
come
glass
by, yeah.
bottle. So I'll put honey in on my food. I'll put it over my meat, my
Yes.
beef.
Oh,
I'll
honey
put it
on
on
steak.
anything.
Don't
Honey on
sleep on
steak is
that.
great.
Yeah. It sounds weird at first. People are like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "No, don't sleep on it. Like, try it out. Put some honey on that perfectly seared steak. Life
It is
changing."
great. It tastes really kind of fulfilling. Like
It's so
it's a kind of,
satisfying.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a satisfying meal. I would say when we used to live in Cancun in Mexico, I got into this habit of really just kind of eating what Paul Saladino does. So I would say,
Mhm.
for anyone who's listening or watching this and they're wondering, maybe what the next step for them is, I would argue it makes sense to go to the extreme to start with,
Yeah.
because you're going to see what an impact it has on your body straight
Mhm.
away. And you're not going to be messing around with what kind of vegetables work best for you, because a lot of people don't react the same way to vegetables. For example, I know that if I eat a lot of seeds and a lot of beans, and this is kind of like understood to be a common symptom, I'll get flatulence,
Yeah.
a lot of flatulence. Like, you think it's healthy to put chia seeds and things in your smoothies, but in reality, you might think that flatulence is normal. You stop doing that, the flatulence goes away.
Goes
Right? That's
away.
not
Yeah, for
normal.
sure. Yeah.
But I just ate beef. I had occasional chicken. Paul really explains why he doesn't eat a lot of chicken, and I kind of agree with him. It's not farmed in a way that where the chickens can eat organically on grass ranges anymore. So
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons, and they kind of get fed this awful mix, and you don't really want that in your body. So I
Mhm.
ate mostly beef. I would have liver quite often. I think there's a limit to how much you should eat liver, because
Yeah.
it's full of vitamins, and
It's
you
very,
can
yes.
actually overdose on them. But I would have uh, I would have honey, the yogurt. I eat a lot of butter. I put butter
Cod
in my
liver too.
coffee.
Cod
Cod liver,
liver,
yeah.
it
Why not?
smells so bad. It tastes so fishy, but it's so buttery and so just decadent. Did I
Hmm.
tell you I snuck it into my husband's food?
No,
He
that's
was
good.
I said to him, "Do you like cod liver?" He was like, "I would never touch that stuff." I said, "But
You've been eating it for
but
the last month.
I said, "But you've eaten it." He said, "No, I haven't." I said, "You've eaten it." He's like, "No, I haven't." Not. I said, "No, I'm telling you, you've eaten it." And he said, "How?" I said, "I put it in yesterday's lunch." And he was like, "What?" "Yes."
But
And
he
then I
didn't
put it in your
notice.
grilled cheese the day before. He was like, "But it tasted so good." I'm like, "See, if you don't know what you're eating and you do it right, it tastes good, but
Yes.
it's good for you."
100%. If you don't know what you're eating, then you're open-minded enough to kind
Yeah.
of consider it.
Tell
And
them
I
after.
even something just as so simple as butter in your coffee sounds weird, and it did for me to begin with. And the people around me, when they see me do it, they're like, "What are you doing?" And I tell them, and I say, "Look, it's got MCT oil in it, and it kind of
Mhm.
helps with the delivery of caffeine. You don't get that spike, you don't get that
Yeah.
fall." And then they try it with the honey as well, and they're like, "Oh my god, this is great!"
Yes.
Like, and I changed their life, because now they're only really going to have coffee with
Mhm.
butter and honey in it, right? Because it just
That's so
doesn't taste
good.
good anymore to
You're
have
doing
just
good work,
milk and
my
sugar.
friend.
I'm doing good work. I was put here for a reason.
Yes.
So yeah, so it's there's so much we could talk about, and I think there's so many more topics. I think maybe what we could do is we could make this a first part of a two-parter,
Sure, yeah.
because there's the whole other aspect of health, which is the mental, emotional, and then also the physical. Because I know you've got a lot of experience in, for example, the physical, right? You can really kind of get down to the nuts and bolts of
Mhm.
what resistance training really means for the human body and longevity. And then we can talk about, like, some of the things that we do to reduce stress and just allow us to operate at a much higher level, through meditation or just stress relief practices or maintenance practices. I know you stretch every morning. which is really impressive because I can't stand stretching. I feel like I'm wasting my time, but
It
I
is
know I'm
so
not.
boring.
It's so boring, right? But
So
it's like, if you
boring.
don't do it, you don't feel as good.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, power yoga has done some wonders for me, which I was never a yoga fan. I don't do it for the whatever spiritual aspect that people
oh yeah.
do it for, because I don't believe in that one, but I do it for the physical benefits I get out of it, which I'm happy to talk about next episode.
Yeah, we should do that. So let's make this part one. And then part two, we'll talk about the other aspects or the elements of health that maybe people would be interested in learning about. So I hope if you're here, you're still listening, you're still watching, I hope you got a lot of value from this episode. This was kind of like off the cuff. We decided to do this last minute. But I think it turned out pretty well. And I'm very happy to talk about this kind of thing because it's one of the most important things for me is health. And I think it really kind of forms that place from which you can attack everything else in life, your career, your family life, your whatever other objectives you have. If your health isn't there, you're really going
Yeah.
to be suffering and working twice as hard through it. So thank you for the conversation. And then if you like this episode, please do share it, like it, subscribe, and then come and join us for the next one where we talk about more of this stuff.
Yes. We'll see you guys.
See you later.
Bye.